go to Twitch and do that real quick. We are live right now, by the way.
Oh, wonderful.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the link so that.
You're going to share the link. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I need to find where it lets me change the name of our current creator dashboard. Go. Awesome. Episode 3. I named this episode Pill Pushers, Politics, and Gun Runners. Pill Pushers, Politics, and Gun Runners. There we go. Alright, cool. Stream info updated. We are live and ready to go. Today we have a bunch of different topics we're going to be talking about. Eric is in the great city of Wimberley, Texas. Has the best internet that has ever existed. And if he falls out tonight, we will continue on without him. But hopefully he will be here the entire time. So, any words, Eric?
I just want to say that if it does go off the rails internet wise, I will be very interested to hear the recording after the fact, because per your own admission, you've been playing a lot of WoW and not keeping up with politics. So I don't know how the episode's going to go.
It's not my fault Shadowlands dropped on Monday, okay?
No. I understand. I'm just saying I will be amused to see how the episode devolves.
Oh, I mean, I got some takes, but we're gonna skip Flynn for sure.
Okay.
So you got to stay till Flynn. All right, I can get through the rest of this myself, I think. But let's start with the news of the week. You know, we like to start our podcast with something spicy, so we started with, Oxycontin is basically a drug lord. Purdue Pharma is basically the drug lord of Oxycontin and has been pushing it. What a surprise! We didn't know that was the case.
Yeah, nobody knew this was the case. I'm less interested in this because let me find the article that I had for this. I'm less interested in this because it's anything revelatory. It's more that, number one, Purdue Pharma, the company that manufactures Oxycontin, has pleaded guilty to a federal judge in New York. They admitted to impeding the DEA's efforts to combat the addiction crisis. They admitted to paying doctors through a speakers program to induce them to write more prescriptions. They admitted to paying electronic medical records company to send doctors information on patients that encouraged them to prescribe opioids. And there's just a bunch of stuff that we've known that these companies do for a while. The Last Week Tonight episode on this was, pretty good on the way that the opioid crisis has been spurred on by these companies. But what's so interesting is that they owned up to it. I guess they got made a relatively good deal.
It's all about making deals for your friends now, right? We got a end of an administration, got to make all those deals for your buddies.
Yeah, I think this is more of a calculated. Biden is probably going to be harder on corporations than Trump is, and that says very little.
Well, could Biden be any easier on corporations than Trump?
That's what I'm saying. That says very little, but I think that they're anticipating that, and that prosecution under a Biden Justice Department would probably be much more stringent. So they should take a deal under Trump now. That's my thinking on it.
Probably the case.
So the deal includes $8.3 billion in penalties and forfeitures, but the company is on the hook for a direct payment to the federal government of only a fraction of that.
I have a very important question for you, Eric. I know I'm going to be shocked by the answer to this question. How many corporate members of Purdue Pharma are going to go to prison for this?
0.
Oh, weird. Hold on.
Yeah, that's
hold on. But if I had, but Eric,
if you had
I had Purdue Pharma's product in my car right now,
you'd be going to jail.
I had, a cup full of it. How long do you think I would go to jail for?
You go to jail for a long ass time, probably for intent to distribute.
Yeah, I would think so, right? But hold on. Aren't they literally admitting an attempt to distribute through extra legal means?
Yes.
Hold on. So you mean our criminal justice system has two sets of laws for individuals and corporations?
Yes.
Oh
Even though
no.
corporations are also individuals.
Hold on, but Supreme Court told me they're people and they have rights. Don't they also have the right to go to jail?
I would think so. So
I'm playing,
anyway,
I'm playing a
no,
little
I understand.
Jacobin magazine right here, right? Like, oh no, right? Like, we don't all know this already, but like, is there really that much of a difference, like, between this and like the dude that sells weed on the street? You know what I mean? Like, the dude that sells weed on the street probably doing a hell of a lot less harm than Purdue Pharma did in this, but he goes to jail. Purdue Pharma gets a slap on the wrist because they've made, oh, okay, so a couple $1 billion. That's a lot of money. Oh my, I wonder how many hundreds of billions of dollars they've made off of Oxycontin.
Well, and like if the argument is that like drug use hurts society, how many like billions of dollars, how many ruined lives has Purdue Pharma contributed to? Like I'm sympathetic that we shouldn't, be nice to cartels, like people who run cartels and stuff like that, because they're bad people. But like at the same time, like the reason that you'll see me roll my eyes when people start getting on the drug dealers are such terrible, awful people, is like, yes, cartels are bad, but we have a legalized form of that in this country that just operates within legal parameters and does shit like this. And, they don't do big, scary stuff like beheading people because they have the cops on their side. They don't need to do it.
No, they don't do things like behead people. They have assassins that wear uniforms. But here's the real truth of the matter, right? If every state in the United States was like what Washington State did and just legalized all drugs, it wouldn't exist? Drug cartels. They'd die. Because there wouldn't be an illegal market for drugs. The second you don't have an illegal market for drugs,
I don't know how true that is, because they have like, these are, people like individuals that have like diverse investment portfolios and stuff like that.
I don't mean the individuals or they would radically change what they are, though. Right? Like they would probably be gun runners at that point, right? Not
I think they would be doing illegal stuff. My point is they would just use those, they would find different
ways. But it's the problem we created through a drug war, right? Because when you create illegal markets, right, you create a situation which when everyone's doing something illegal, you can't go to the police for help. So then you create a system that devolves where the most violent or the most vicious become the most powerful, because it's not like their enemies can go to the police. They're all engaging in illicit activities, right? So
there's a lot of cool documentaries on this and a lot of good books, but honestly, Narcos is really good. So maybe just watch Narcos.
Which one?
Both, because they're
original Narcos was kind of goat though.
I don't know. Narcos Mexico has gone on for like 3 seasons and it's pretty killer.
Yeah, so did original Narcos. Original Narcos has 3 seasons, right?
2 seasons.
Okay. I think they had a 3rd season. It just sucked. If I remember right.
I don't remember. I just recently watched them too, and I don't.
The Colombian drug cartel, right?
But those shows are really good, and like while they do fudge some of the facts a little bit to make a more compelling narrative, and they like collapse characters into each other, like they do a really good job of highlighting how the U.S. federal government has basically spurred on the drug war through policies and backdoor deals with corrupt governments. Particular like backing the Contras, fighting the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, which was like, honestly, like it makes me sad that we don't learn more, that we don't teach more about that in public schools. But like that seems to be something that is like such a huge point in American history, like that's relevant to contemporary issues that we just don't talk about.
So one of my professors at the University of Houston, his name is Thomas O'Brien. And he writes pretty extensively about this in a lot of his books. He teaches a course called CIA and the Third World. in college, and the goal of the CIA in the third world has always been one thing and only one thing, which is to create situations in which the American influence can be exerted in a way that it is that is immovable, right? The goal isn't to have friendly governments; it's to have pawns, and to literally have people who cannot go against you, because if they do, the entire situation collapses around them. And Nicaragua is one of the great examples of that, right? Like the entire government was completely reliant upon CIA funding and CIA assets to be able to attack the Contras, right? Like so, these drug lords and the government at the time, right, were both being fed direct CIA intelligence to be able to attack these different groups, right? So like these sorts of discussions, right? And it's funny too, because if they thought people think that it's ideological a lot of times, right? Can't let communism get into South America. Well, that was a very huge stated goal of the CIA. If a communist regime was more willing to cooperate with the Americans than a nationalist regime, it did not matter to the CIA what your political ideologies were, as long as you were willing to play ball. And so these sorts of like these discussions, right, of how we've done these sorts of things. I mean, like Vanderbilt, right, one of the American greats, was built because of military intervention in other countries that built his railroad empire, right? So
Like
we have a
the
long, long history of intervening in South American politics for our own purposes. But interrelated with that is the United States is such an extraordinary world power and extraordinary commerce and market that whatever markets we create or don't create will forever be fulfilled by South America.
right, and we talked about Confessions of an Economic Hitman last time, so I'm not going to get into the way that like non-intelligence organizations are complicit in all of this as well. But kind of to circle back around to Purdue Pharma, this is very much in the realm of, one set of rules for corporations, one set of rules for the people. The court system is a joke. The fact that I don't even know. This sort of stuff just makes me extremely angry. And I'm glad that Purdue is, air quotes, being held accountable. Like I'm glad that that this is hurting their pocket a little bit, but they got deep pockets, and this isn't hurting them nearly to the degree that it ought to. Um,
The question
so
is,
so
why do they still have a license to operate? They're meeting if they are claiming and agreeing to the statement that they have taken a drug, an opioid in particular, high classification drug, and actively pushed its use in situations that were not acceptable, and actively bribed individuals into prescribing it through extreme extra legal means. The question at some point needs to be, why are they allowed to be a pharmaceutical company?
well, this is a seemingly unrelated issue, but it operates according to the same logic, which is that this is the same country that will allow a police officer to maintain employment, to take benefits, to continue working and getting all their pension and stuff like that, despite having been shown to have flagrantly violated somebody's constitutional rights. So there's there's one logic that applies to a public servant that maintains the status quo and protects capital, but then there's there's the same logic applies to those institutions themselves when they're proven to have been malfeasant. And I'm not sure that that's a good comparison to make, but realize that the people that have the power, the same logic applies to them. The people who don't have the power, that logic doesn't apply to.
Or the people who are on the other side and have power in another place, right? Like, so, I famously, like, I don't know why I keep going back to the story, but you're familiar with the story of Anastasia?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, very famously, right, the Bolsheviks in Russia murdered the entire Tsarist family, right? It's a very famous instance. It's been very publicized by the West for various reasons, particularly politically ideological reasons. But one of the interesting factoids that people always leave out of this discussion is the fact that the people who actually killed the Tsarist regime, the people who actually committed the murders, every single one of them had lost a loved one to a member of the Tsarist regime. Right? That was how they were chosen. They were men who had lost their wives and children to the Tsarist regime murdering them. Right? That's why they were chosen. That's why they were given the job.
That's a useful omission because
Right.
it like Western propaganda of like, look at how horrible the Soviets are. There's this great Michael Parenti quote from that video about Cuba that I sent you, where he's talking about he says like, and these liberals, they're so concerned about the rights of the fascists after the revolution that they never once bothered to ask about how the people's rights were trampled over. But that is exactly the logic that we are operating on here. It's always, well, what's fair? Like, what's fair to these corporate CEOs? Think about their wives. Think about their.
Okay, so sort of losing Eric here, but I get the idea, right? Like think about their lives, but
think about their rights. What about the thousands of lives that they ruined? My point is strictly that like it fits in with Parenti's idea that liberals are overly concerned with the rights of the oppressor and not sufficiently concerned with how the rights of the people were violated prior to the revolution.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the Tsarist regime, right? Like people are like, nowadays people are like, oh, well, the Tsarist regime was murdered off by the Bolsheviks. And it's like, do you have any understanding of what the Tsarist regime was? It's an extreme authoritarian dictatorship.
Right. Like, and that is the other part of that Parenti argument that he makes, where he says that, you can, the best way that I think to compare a nation that became communist in the 20th century is, sure, you can look at what they did afterwards and you can talk about that and you can be critical of it, but you can also look at what that nation was like beforehand. And I think that the Tsarist regime is a perfectly good example of that. I think Cuba is another good example of that.
Yeah, like you were talking about the Parenti asking the Cuban, like there was a hospital. It's a hospital now, right? There never was a hospital before, right? So the individual lives of the oppressed is the question, right? There's also just like this discussion where it's like we live in a country that's extraordinarily wealthy and extraordinarily powerful, and we allow organizations to work this way when we don't have to, right? If Purdue Pharma were put out to pasture tomorrow, we just took the whole company apart, split it into pieces, and spent all the money that they have in capital on people who had been affected by Purdue Pharma's negligent policies. Say we lived in a world that would actually do something that just, right? The rest of the U.S. pharmaceutical industry would be fine. They'd be like, yes, now all of Purdue Pharma's stuff we can now make generics of because they don't exist as a corporation anymore. They're not patent holders anymore, right? It's not like the pharmaceutical industry would actually, I mean, it would be good for every other entity that is acting ethically, right? It would be bad for any entity that's acting unethically because they could be the next Purdue Pharma, right? But you would set the precedent, right? You do shit like Purdue.
All acting unethically.
Huh?
All acting unethically. So they all
only because they're allowed to, though, right?
Right. But my point is that like part of the incentive structure that's preventing this from happening is the concerted lobbying against that, because they recognize that they would all be next if they pushed for it to be, taken away.
So I'll give you the best instance of this. Give you the best. Why is Purdue Pharma any different than Shkreli? Pharma Bro, remember, buys this treatment drug, jacks it up 3,000%, right? And then because of some of the malfeasance of what he's done, right, particularly economic malfeasance, he ends up going to jail, right? He's held accountable for his actions, okay? I'm actually going to say that. Like, he was actually held accountable for his actions, right? His economic actions, not his drug pricing.
Mhm.
But he didn't do near the harm that Purdue Farm is doing.
No, but he's an
Ooh, are you here? Hello. All right. I think the argument, though, is that he's an individual versus a corporation is going to probably be what comes out of Eric's mouth because we've talked about this one enough. But I'm kind of losing him a little bit. We're going to continue on anyways. So I'm going to talk about the thing that I wanted to talk about. Trump functionally conceded this week. Did he concede? No, of course not. He's never going to concede because he plans on doing the Andrew Jackson route of it is, oh my, I was cheated out of an election that I clearly wasn't cheated out of. Andrew Jackson actually had an argument because Congress literally intervened to not make him president of the United States, right? Like, Trump is just crying. But what ends up happening here is that we're going to have a discussion largely on these sorts of we're going to have a discussion largely on these sorts of discussions. I think you're back, Eric. I've moved on to the Trump concession, but you disappeared on me. So, did you have any thoughts? I'm gonna wait until you're actually talking right to turn your volume back on for the stream. So I can see you. Yes, all right, you're back on. I have redone your audio, so you're
okay.
back on the stream. So we have two different audio switches on Streamlabs. So I have one for my microphone, and then I also have one for the desktop volume, which is you. So I just turned you off because I was like, I can't hear him. He's probably going to loudly come back on at some point in time in the middle of me talking. So I'm just going to mute him on the stream and then keep talking. And then when he comes back, he'll be fine. But we're back. So my take was you were probably going to say yes, but he's an individual and they're a corporation. They hold corporate interest and corporate control. Thus, they don't get punished the same.
I don't think mine is less on that. It's more like in the broader like cultural imaginary of the American public, people are at fault for everything. If we can find a bad person and point to them, like they're the problem, right? Like we can find the bad politician, they're the bad ones. Like, right. American politics is a great example of this. Like it's all corrupt. They're all making backroom deals. They've all probably contributed in some way, shape, or form to this like broader corrupt system and like bad shit. And yet you talk to a Trump supporter. Waiting.
I kept looking back and there was like torn up leather that my dog had gotten to. So every time I went like this, there would be like 3 black piles back there. And I was like, what the hell is that? So I had to get up and go do it because my OCD was bothering me. And I was like, God, what is that? He's telling me he didn't do something crazy back there. I go back there and they're like strips of, I don't know, like I guess leather or something. Not leather, but like strips from something that he'd torn apart. It was bothering me, so I had to go do it. It had to be done.
So my point was more like in the broader cultural imaginary of the United States, we like to find individuals who are at fault. We don't like to think structurally in this country. And so I think a good example of this is all the outrage over Hillary Clinton, or you can look at the liberal outrage against Donald Trump. These are all like people operating in their sort of like business as usual capacities. Trump just like said the quiet part loud. That's what liberals found so offensive about him. And Hillary Clinton represents the sort of smug, like, keep your mouth shut, you dumb bozos, like, side that the Republicans don't like. And so it's this culture war that we've seen play out over the last 4 years, I think is a really good example of like, we focus too much on individuals and not enough on structure. I think the reason that Skrelly got targeted was not because of like, he's an easier target, but because like, there was more public outcry about him. Like so far, I am the only person in like, and I know this is anecdotal and is not good evidence or whatever, but like of the people I know, I'm the only person who is like made any like sort of public recognition of this Purdue Pharma thing. And like, yeah, it's probably, not going to go that far, but like the public doesn't care about this. The public cared way more about Pharma Bro because he was an easy target for people to get mad about. Look at this jackass CEO who jacked up the prices of EpiPens. What a dickbag. Right? Like that's the approach that the American public takes when we think about politics. Look at Donald Trump. Look at how bad and like loudmouthed he is and how disrespectful he is of the office. Meh. Look at how corrupt and terrible Hillary Clinton is. Meh. But you start talking about, structural issues in this country and like the things we've talked about on this, like financial capital, the intelligence community, things like that. You start talking about these structural problems and people's eyes glaze over.
Yeah, wait till we get to the end of this podcast. We'll talk about a structural problem that nobody wants. Right? Nobody wants to talk about that. I mean, the last person to actually talk about it in a realistic sense was Dwight Eisenhower. Explain that one to me. Like the last public official to really recognize what the military-industrial complex is was probably Eisenhower.
Eisenhower and Smedley Butler.
Huh?
I'm so excited to talk about Dwight Eisenhower and Smedley Butler.
Well, I mean, Eisenhower was like, hold on. I was a general and I benefited from this stuff, but
Smedley Butler was a general too.
Yeah. All right. So Trump concession. We're just gonna move on super quick. Basically, what happened was the go-ahead for transition as it started. The lady who doesn't deserve to have her name said on our podcast because when you are a political operative, you don't get named on my podcast, was holding it up for the Trump administration and has been told, apparently, by the administration itself, start the process. And my take on this is that Trump is a populist and he's attempting to do an Andrew Jackson. Very famously, Andrew Jackson loses one of the only contested elections in U.S. history. And he actually was the highest vote getter of any candidate, but did not receive 290 electoral college votes. That occurs, and state delegations choose the leader. Grand compromise was made, and I believe I'm not certain exactly who the president was, but Andrew Jackson ends up losing, calls it the corrupt bargain, and then campaigns for 4 straight years to be president of the United States, and ends up winning his second term as president after losing. Only president to lose and win.
Before we kind of get into the consequences of this and like some of the batshit crazy stuff that Trump is doing now that he like is on his way out, do you think that like which side, because I've seen kind of two sides emerge on this. There's one side of people that says he's going to start a media company and like try to just make as much profit as possible. I tend to see these being the sorts of people who had the take that he didn't want to be president to begin with. He just did it as a cash grab. And I'm somewhat sympathetic to that view, but I keep seeing all this stuff about him running again. And
he's going to run again. It's not a question. He's running in 2024 unless he dies. And there's nothing going to prevent that. And even if he does want to create a media empire, it only helps his media empire to run in 2024.
That's fair. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive.
I don't think that he's going to get the Republican nomination. I think Republicans are going to screw him over.
Hold on one second. Let me pull this up.
Because the thing with Don is old Donnie boy, the old Donnybrook as he would be called here in the South, has a problem. His problem is he lost. Right? His problem is Republican governors, Republican legislatures of state legislations, and Republican secretaries of states are the ones telling him he lost. And because of that, there's going to be this thing where if you were, let's just throw a name out there, Who's someone that could run for president for the Republican Party in 2024?
Tom Cotton.
If you're Tom Cotton, you go, you know what I've never done? I've never lost an election. Right? And then you play the Trump's a loser card. And honestly, like, some of that will work for some traditional Republicans, right? With the whole thing of, it doesn't matter if we're different or if we're the same, if we're from Washington or not. The only thing that matters is getting Biden out of the White House, right? Because they're going to spend 4 years demonizing Joe Biden, right? So
I think there's a reasonable case to be made that, like, one of these fascist-minded Republicans, they run on a, like, I agree with what the president tried to do, but I can do it more competently. I think that that's the line that will end up being taken by the
Is it Lindsey Graham?
Possibly.
Like,
so there's an
feels like
interesting.
Lindsey is the one. Lindsey is the one setting himself up as Trump 2.0.
Tom Cotton kind of did that.
I don't know. I feel like Tom Cotton's a bit more centrist, right? Not super centrist.
He's very big on, like, the militarism and like pro-policing stuff that Trump has done. My reason for being skeptical of the claim that the RNC would just completely screw him over is there's a Politico Morning Consult poll that came out that said that 53% among Republicans and Republican-leaning independents support among Republicans and Republican-leaning independents would support Trump in a 2024 run. Now, this is really early. We don't know who else is running. We don't know what the institutions will do. But so far, the Republican Party has shown themselves to be more competent than the Democratic Party insofar as they are responsive to their base.
But he's 78. He runs for president 4 years. He's 78 years old. He would be sworn in on January 10th, right, of 2025. Or 2025, yeah. He would be 78 years old, turning 79 on June 14th.
I don't know.
Are we going to have the same Trump in 4 years?
I don't know. That stops him. I mean, I think does his mental condition continue to erode?
I mean, it depends on how much Sudafed he keeps taking, right? Dude's a Fed addict, right? Like, dude's got to get that Sudafed in him, all right? Like, the freaking hilarious picture from, like, early in his administration where he opens the cabinet.
You can literally see it in the
you
drawer.
can see the, like, boxes of Chinese Sudafed in the dill. Like, it's very clear that part of the negotiation process between Trump and China is, like, China's like, hold on, let me give you some of this first. And they hand him some of that good Chinese Sudafed. You know what I mean?
What did they call the people who go buy Sudafed in Breaking Bad? Smurfs?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I think it's Smurfs. Do you think Trump has Smurfs running around getting Sudafed?
Confirmed. Yeah, he's lots of them, right? Like, dude's just down in Sudafed constantly, right? No, but, like, dude does not have a good diet, right? Like, that's been known, right? Eats junk food, drinks Diet Coke daily.
He's also rich.
But that doesn't matter with coronary artery disease, dude. Like, that stuff kills you. It don't matter how rich you are if you're, taking the Fed and drinking Diet Coke every day and eating hamburgers all the time, right? Like, I get, yes, he's also relatively physically active, right? He's been golfing a shit ton, so apparently the dude golfs a little bit, right? But having said that, he's 74 years old right now. If you look at a picture of Donald Trump 4 years ago versus a picture of Donald Trump now, you get the classic president look, right? The, oh my God, what happened to this man over the last 4 years? Right? Like, Obama was the one, right? Like, Obama went from looking like he was 35 to looking like he was 65 in 8 years, right? Yep. Like, and he's not 65 now. So, like,
I'll never see office. I want to maintain my dashing good looks.
Yeah. I mean, I think Melania is probably hoping you don't make it another 4 years. She can go get another rich husband. But neither here nor to be fair though, like all the criticisms. So think about Joe Biden. No. Think about Joe Biden right now. Right? Joe Biden right now is younger than Trump would be in 2024.
That's all fair. That's all fair. My only hesitance on this is that the Republican Party has a history of listening to their base and doing what the base wants. If they do that, I think Trump wins the nomination. If they don't, and they run this sort of like, there's two ways that I see this going down. Either the more like traditional, trickle down supply side Republicans win out and they make a big push and they get their nominee in, or the GOP runs with the Trump base, but they do so on the basis of we appreciate what President Trump did. We think we can do so more competently, and makes that push. So I think if he doesn't run and win the nomination, it's because of one of those two factors.
So the only world in which I think that Trump runs and wins the nomination is if he pulls an Andrew Jackson. What I mean by this is for the next 4 years, he is actively campaigning. I don't mean passively.
Rallies too much. I think he does because he likes the rallies too much.
He does, but he's an old man, right? Like, there's no way around it. He's an old man, and taking that much Sudafed and getting that ramped up every night or every week is not good for the body, right? Like, and does he run himself down in a couple years of doing it, right? Because he's not getting any of the benefits from it, right? All he's getting is the rally response, but then everybody reminds him, oh, by the way, you lost.
There's also the conditions that come up after people have had a COVID diagnosis that he's going to have to contend with.
Yeah.
Like something like 1 in 5 people develop a mental illness afterwards, which like Trump probably already has several. So, but
I don't think he has a mental illness. I think he has personality disorders, right?
That's fair.
Real. But like, let's not minimize actual mental illness, right? Like, these are real diseases that really do affect people.
That's fair. I'm saying like I do think that he has some form of a psychological disorder, like he probably has dementia or some early onset Alzheimer's maybe. I think that the way he conducts himself in public is like it's reasonable to speculate that there are some underlying like psychological disorders that haven't been disclosed to the public. I also think like pseudoephedrine, addiction like probably has some negative consequences for the brain.
Well, so I'm not trying. It might not be what you're talking about. It might just be the come down, right? Like, so there's a huge difference, right?
I'm not. My point is that I'm not trying to minimize this. I'm just saying I think that there is a reasonable case to be made that he is like coping with disorders that will make it difficult for him to run.
I mean, the secondary question to this though is, does Biden have a second term, right? Even if he does make it through this term, right? Like, he'll be 82.
He's said that he's not going to.
So does he walk out the door and allow Kamala Harris to run as president?
That's the take that I'm most sympathetic to. I could also see him tapping other people though, but I think they decided that Kamala Harris was the least offensive person. That also simultaneously like could be argued to be progressive on paper. You and I know this, but it's this sort of, it's the same way that Hillary Clinton said she was.
The war on drug czars of LA County. Yeah, let's talk about that progressive individual.
But my point is that like they think progressive equals black.
Oh, she fits the right color profile. I got you.
Yeah. And so they make that argument. They're like, she's a woman of color. She's like the most progressive senator in the country. Because that's the argument that's been made, is that like she's the most progressive senator, which who fucking did that study? Like that person, I'm not going to say what that person deserves.
I'm sorry, but like, there were two presidential candidates for the United States that were both senators that were both far, far, far more aggressive than she was.
Who?
And their names are Bernie and Elizabeth. So,
but the question I have is, who did that study that named her the most progressive senator? Because that is just a lie. It's just not true. But that's my point, is that the Democratic Party will take that stuff and they'll take the sort of like color coding, the gender coding, and conflate those with like issues-based progressivism, economic, like, you know, leftism.
unfortunately,
and they will put that as the argument that Harris is the best candidate that we can win. And that was part of the reason that she was decided to be the candidate, is that the VP pick is that
Tulsi Gabbard murdered her.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like, the most vicious takedown I have ever seen in a nominee debate ever was Tulsi Gabbard laying into her.
I think that there's a reasonable argument that like Kamala laying into Biden is up there as well.
But what?
That Harris laying into Biden for busing and stuff like that is up there as well.
And I don't know. Tulsi Gabbard's takedown of Kamala Harris was, I mean,
can you imagine?
To be fair, it was enough to make me go, let's look at this Tulsi Gabbard chick, because she seems to have some, at least some gumption. You know what I mean? Like, she ain't scared of people.
She was determined early on to be a Russian asset, so they decided that like she was.
Right.
I think. Can you imagine if that had been Bernie doing that takedown though, or Elizabeth Warren? Like,
it's not in their personality.
I know it's not in their personality, but my point is that like
I could see AOC doing that. I could see Ilhan Omar doing that.
The point I am making is simply that I think that part of the reason that that Tulsi Gabbard was an easy target after that, she was easy to sideline because she has no power, and she's been somebody who both the like left of the party and the right of the party have been critical of, because she's kind of like a weird. She's a weirdo in her own.
She's a human. That's her problem. Yeah. She's an actual human being who's more complicated than political ideology. So
that's fair.
Because she's a complicated human being. Like, so some of the criticisms of her were like, oh, is she like a Modi like friend? Right? Like, and it's like her family has some ties to the Modi regime in India, and it's like, yeah, so does every successful family in India, right? Like, you have to. That's how that system works, right? Like, you play ball or you get sidelined, right? So yes, if she has even moderately successful family members in India, then yes, they're interrelated with the Modi.
My point is merely that she is a political oddball in the landscape of American politics, and that translates to her being easier to sideline.
Unfortunately, she might be exactly what American politics needs.
I don't disagree with that. I think that
flawed, human, problematic perspective some of the time, right? But that's the only person, literally the only person in this entire election cycle that has just been completely honest 100%. Right? I think she just tells you how she thinks the world is, and she moves on. Right? Not that that's the capital T truth, right? It is her perception of the truth, just like I have a perception of the truth and you have a perception of the truth, right? But
Marianne Williamson didn't fit that bill. You don't think so?
Because she, wanted to take back all those anti-vaxxer comments she'd made about 10 years ago.
That I forgot about that.
Yeah. All of a sudden, when she was the Democratic nominee for president, she stopped being an anti-vaxxer, stopped believing in crystals and shit. So,
I just remember all the peace and love. We got to have a love revolution type thing. That was what I remembered.
I can't comment or respond to that because I'm a and the only hand gestures I would make right now would all be unprofessional. So
Do they involve the finger to the left or right of your ring finger?
no, they do not. They are you a fan of WWE wrestling?
No.
I'll just say Triple X did it. But moving on.
Bringing up Marion Williamson is just like I think that like we there was an interesting amalgamation of characters there. I don't think all of them were 100% honest. I'm not 100% sure that Tulsi was 100% honest. I I think that like that if this election was good for anything, it was a good showcase of the ideological complexity within the Democratic Party because you have people like Andrew Yang, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard, who all get cast together as the progressive wing of the party. But then if you look at them on a policy level, they all have very different ideas, not just like for policy, but also for like how we engage in politics to begin with. Um,
What is
Warren
Andrew
has
doing nowadays? Because like that dude should
he's
be
on,
doing stuff.
he's on CNN or ABC or something like that.
I heard he was moving to Georgia to help with the Georgia runoffs.
If he is, good for him.
Um, is he just like a contributor? Is that what they get?
Yeah, I think he was on a lot more during the election, but now I haven't seen him very much, so
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't watch most of those things. So
I don't watch news at all. I
what are
read.
you standing on? It's like I can just see my dog's head peek.
Yeah,
It's like I'm watching.
well, little cutie.
But so we have all right, cool. Let's move on to Flynn. What do you want to say about Flynn? Is he going to be pardoned? Do we know,
He
Eric?
was, he was pardoned today. Um, I don't think that this is a coinky dink. I think that Trump is now going to go on a spree of pardoning the people he likes and executing people he doesn't like. I read a disturbing article that he's trying to he's trying to get it to where U.S. executions can be carried out by firing squads again. I will pull it up.
Why?
The cruelty is the point. So Business Insider, DOJ looking to bring back firing squads, electrocutions for elections. The Independent says Trump pushing through dozens of last minute policy changes, including use of firing squads. Common Dreams, truly grotesque. On way out of the door, Trump prioritizes bringing back executions by firing squad. Like those are the top three when I search Trump firing
So
squad.
the thing that I'd read that was disturbing about this discussion, so it's a little bit off of this, because we knew
My point is
Flynn
just
was
that
going to get.
yeah, he's going to pardon people he likes. He's going to execute, and he's going to vote for executing people who are perceived as bad people, so that way he can say like, I am the law and order president. And these do nothing Democrats are going to come into office and they're not going to do anything for 4 years. At least I gave them the tools to be tough on crime. They did nothing with it.
Yeah. So the other aspect is there's 60 people. There are 60 inmates right now on federal death row. Okay. The number, they're exactly 60.
3 of them, I believe, are sidelined to be executed between now and January 20th.
So far.
So far, 3 of them are
so the discussion that's occurring right now is acceleration of pace, and I think the reason why these other discussions are happening has nothing to do with being law and order president, but has to do with the fact that they can't actually access the drugs anymore. And this is largely due to Germany's push in the EU to not allow the sale of these drugs to countries that use them for the purposes of executions. Not the drug that actually kills you, but the other portions of the cocktail that go with it have almost universally been supplied to us by literally Germany. ironic. But they're not. These drugs they're designed to be used for surgeries. Originally, that was their original design. They put your body into a state of basically paralyzes your body to some degree, reduces the ability of your pain receptors to feel the pain, and then also slows your heart rate tremendously. And they were originally designed for surgery, right? Like if you're doing very extensive surgeries on like a gunshot victim, right? These were good drugs for that. They never were ended up getting used for that. They were used for the precursor to putting in the lethal injection, which if you ever do a lethal injection without these drugs, is a very, 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 very violent cardiac arrest, right? A very painful, violent cardiac arrest. There have been a couple of them in the state of Texas, not federal, state executions in the state of Texas that included, I can't hear you if you're talking, bud, that included a screw up of these cocktails and individuals like writhing in pain for 5, 10, 15 minutes before dying in some of the most morbid and disgusting deaths you've ever seen in your life. Firing squad, million times more humane than that, right? So one of the problems that even in Texas especially has had this problem, that's why our execution rate has dropped precipitously, is we can't access these drugs anymore. So there's no alternatives that have been developed that are widely sold. So it slows down the rate of execution tremendously. You're having to domestically create these drugs. Probably the reason why Trump is doing this is they probably only have enough for 3. He wants to kill a lot more. He'd probably clear the entire 60 if he could.
Yeah.
Right? But he can't because they don't have access.
So that's something that's kind of tangential to the Flint thing. I just think it kind of follows from this like larger point of like Trump is doing a lot of wacky, crazy shit in the last, couple of months, and we should expect more wacky and crazy shit. I guess with the Flynn pardon, I'm kind of iffy on it because like Flynn did illegal shit and it's definitely not good. But at the same time, I also think that like number one, the backlash from this from the Biden administration is going to be a hard look at the death penalty. I'm sorry, I'm conflating two issues here that we kind of got off on separate tracks on. I think on the one hand, like with the death penalty stuff, I think the good thing that comes of this is Biden has like talked extensively about his stance on the death penalty. And I think we might, see a administration that is hostile to the existence of that policy. I think that would be net good. I think that on the Flynn side, where Flynn gets pardoned, and that's not great.
It depends how the pardon is written. That's the important factor.
Right? I think Trump. He has to be talking about the FISA stuff. Like he has to be like because that was the way that the defense played out.
He tweeted about it. Okay. Claimed he was going to do it. It has been said that he has done it. However, when the Biden administration walks in the door, they're going to look at that pardon. That pardon is not written correctly. It doesn't matter. Flynn's going to jail, right?
That's fair. And the administration is not the most competent in the world, so it very well may have a bunch of problems with it.
Because it's one thing to say, I'm going to pardon someone. It's another thing to write a pardon in a way that is incontrovertible in court, right? Because it has to be perfectly written, right? Now, the other thing is he can only pardon him for crimes he's committed to this point, right? And he has to be specific about those crimes. So if the FBI went after him for FISA stuff, right, then it turns around that.
So the FBI went after him under a FISA warrant. The Trump administration has been critical of the FISA process because they argue that like it's not transparent and that they didn't get access to it and that's bad.
But if you're a good prosecutor,
which by the way is good, the FISA process is bad, and any Democrat that is defending the FISA process in order as a dig for Trump are just working to expand the intelligence state and to ultimately further securitize American life. Like, so these people like Adam Schiff and stuff like that, who played defense for the intelligence community through the entirety of the Russia investigation, are not our friends. They are not good people.
I mean, Adam
Flynn is
Schiff
bad.
is clearly just like, I mean, he's been from day one, right? He is the intelligence committee. The reason he's the intelligence committee chairman is because the intelligence agencies want him to be.
Yeah. I mean, look, Flynn is a bad guy. Sure. Like Manafort, bad guy. Trump, not a good guy. We can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. We don't need to have this binary worldview where Trump is bad and anybody who's opposed to Trump is suddenly a knight in shining armor, because that's just not true. The FISA process is bad, and it is good that the Trump administration has been critical of the FISA courts. Maybe the things that they're being critical of it for are not good, and colluding with Russia would not be desirable. I'm skeptical to the degree that that even went on, but
So,
at the end of
quick
the day,
question
my
about that though.
the FISA process sucks, and it's good that we have had an administration that is hostile to it.
So, super quick question. I largely think the Russian investigation was largely. I don't think that there was any proof of collusion. And I'm willing to say that because I think it was a political tool, right? And I also think it was an intelligence issue. Do I think illegal activity probably happened between members of the Trump campaign and foreign operatives? Yes. Do I think Trump did that? No.
No.
Right? And that's the difference. But here's what I'm going to say, right? Like, I'm okay with the idea of, if I'm running a campaign, let's say, right? And it's a big campaign. I'm not, and Eric, you are my campaign manager. I'm not going to know everything you do, right? And I'm also not going to know everything you order. If I did, what the hell is the point of having Eric as my campaign manager?
Right.
Right?
Plausible deniability.
Yeah, you're my plausible deniability. So anything shady that happens, I'm going to get Eric to do, and I'm going to know nothing about it so that I can say, when asked about it on stage in front of 1 million people, I knew nothing about it. Right? And so I think that that's really what happened, right? Yes, there was some discussion behind the scenes. I also would argue that that's probably not the first time that's happened either, right?
Not. I mean, you look at the stuff with the Clinton campaign in Ukraine and stuff like that was happening. Those sorts of discussions are
the best dig at Biden Trump had was created by Clinton. Think about that.
It is super important that we're clear on this, because the last 4 years it's been really hard to have any sort of nuanced discussion about this. In the way that Trump can be critical of things and be right. Yeah. It's possible that he is a bad person and that he's doing this in a way that's self-serving, but it's ultimately saying things that are correct. I think a few examples of this are when he made the dig at Petraeus saying that we shouldn't be arming terrorist cells. Yeah, we shouldn't be arming jihadis in the Middle East. That seems like a good idea. When Trump calls out nepotism in Ukraine, despite the fact that he's the most nepotistic president in recent history, he's not wrong that this sort of everyday nepotism that we see from Joe Biden is not good. When we see Trump criticizing the FISA process, he's not wrong. So we need to recommit ourselves to the pursuit of nuance and to be able to, on the one hand, say yes, this is shitty and self-serving, and it's not coming from a place of genuinely caring about this issue. It's a way to score quick political points, but also acknowledging that that is correct.
All right. So speaking of powers that he has and may actually use or may not use, so important aspect of this, the eviction moratorium and extra unemployment benefits that are being given to millions of Americans right now because of
CARES Act are expiring on the 31st of December.
Expiring on the 31st. Now, to give a little bit of background for people so that they don't think we're just Trump bashing. Trump is the only reason that these are here till the 31st in the first place. He originally extended them, right?
Should have taken the deal back when it was offered, because now she can't get leverage.
Either here or there, neither here or there. What I'm going to say is he had the authority to do it and did it. He technically still has the authority to extend it further if he so chose.
But he's not going to,
He's
because
not
he doesn't
going to, most people think. Go ahead. I'm going to let you do your thing now. What do you think? So you think he's not going to?
I don't think he has an incentive to. I think he's capricious enough to make people suffer. And I think he will do the Republican tactic of doing something bad and then blaming it on the following Democratic administration. So, for example, when Republicans are like, Obama crashed the economy, not true. The economy crashed under Bush, right? But Republicans still blame Obama for the economic crisis, and they can get away with it because we are in a country of low information voters, where most people who are engaged in politics are one of two types. Either they consume so much information that they're drowning in it and they can't tell what's true, or they're literally only making evaluations on the basis of affect and not on the basis of what's actually going on. So that portion of the electorate is super susceptible to this argument that, like, well, Biden and Pelosi and Schumer couldn't get anything done, and that's their fault, when in reality, like, it was Republicans who had power at the time that nothing was done. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think that, like, it makes sense politically for Trump not to do it, because that can later be used as a cudgel against Democrats.
Here's a better answer. You ready?
Okay.
Trump waits until December 30th, then does it. Okay. Here's the reason. Because he likes being the savior. He blames Democrats and he blames Republicans in the Congress for not coming together and get the deal done, even though that's completely capricious and ridiculous because it's not happening because of him. Right? And then he has the ability to come in, save the day, and say to both the Republican and Democratic parties, I'm the only thing that made anything work. And that's going to be his 2024 campaign pitch anyways. I'm the only reason these things worked. Right? Because if it was left to Republicans and Democrats on 10/31, these would have all gone away. On 10/31, they would have all gone away on 10/31 had I not stepped in. I stepped in and extended them to December in the hopes that Democrats and Republicans would get their crap together and would come up with a deal. They never did, ignoring the facts that he's the reason most of those deals didn't happen. Okay? Ignoring all of that. Because nobody pays attention to that, Eric. Nobody in 4 years is going to remember that Trump prevented it. All they're going to remember, and all he can point to, is that he extended it twice. He helped Americans and they needed it the most.
So here's a question that just comes to mind. So let's say you're right about that, and Trump does this as a way to score political points with Americans and make himself look good, better than the Democratic or Republican Party. And let's say that you're correct on this, and I'm correct on, and that we're both correct on he gets sidelined. He gets sidelined.
He primaries the hell out of them. He runs in the general election and screws the Republican Party. Are you kidding me?
My question is, do you think he runs as an independent?
Yes, absolutely. He rosters the shit out of them.
And then Republicans just lose.
Yeah, like bad. Because he only cares about himself. He doesn't give a shit about the Republican Party.
I hope that happens. That would be funny.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the risk of sidelining Trump, is that Trump will just run independent.
Right.
And he will pull enough people that it will screw the Republican Party. And he can also probably gain some favorable deals with the Democratic Party if he does so.
It's going to make me look bad, but I honestly don't even remember which positions we took on whether or not Trump would win the primary or not. But one of us is right and one of us is wrong if that's the case.
Yeah. So, all right, cool. So eviction moratorium and unemployment benefits, they're both up. And same day, new year, 2021 starts with people getting evicted, or it starts with Trump trying to save the day. One of those two worlds is an eventuality.
Yeah.
I'm going to point this out to you as someone who has very recently shot for an apartment. looking at the prices of apartments in the general area, those companies definitely aren't betting on Trump extending the moratorium because they are drastically dropping their prices. And
Wait,
so
what's the drop rate for like a 2-bedroom apartment? Because like
$100
I
to
know
$200 a month
they're
from its
dropping
original
about
price.
$100 a month. Wow. So my apartment back before I moved, I was for a 2-bedroom apartment with a yard. I was paying like 1,200 a month,
Yeah, you would probably be paying
like $1,000 to my
11. We're
damn.
talking just rent, right?
Yeah, just rent, no utility.
11.
Oh wait, no, mine factored in utilities. Sorry.
Well, I don't know. And it also has to do with part of town, right? So you should go. You know what you can do, Eric, though? Go to that exact same apartment complex you previously did. Go look if they have any of those units available and see what their rent prices are. I bet you they're lower.
They probably. I have no desire to do that though. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, they're dropping, right? So I think that there is definitely like, so you know how like apartment complexes typically have their high and low, at the lowest that they'll do it at and the highest that they'll do it at when they don't have an available unit. Their
Mhm.
highs and lows, everything is on the low end and nothing's on the high end. And that's kind of what's been going on. But having said that, they're definitely betting. These companies are betting that there's not going to be a moratorium.
Well, I think I can't really blame them. The consensus is in the direction that like Trump isn't going to do anything.
Okay.
Like
So
I'm definitely staking out the safer position. I think there's a strong possibility you're right, but I've like the position I've staked out for myself on this is probably the safer position.
I think it also has to do with who's in Trump's ear right now. The question largely is has he completely given up on the idea of being president and now he's starting to listen to campaign managers? Because if he's starting to listen to new campaign concepts for 2024 already, then my move makes sense.
Yeah,
If he's
that's
listening to political operatives that are talking about saving your ass when you get out of here, then it wouldn't surprise me if he vacates the presidency in the next 20 days to get his own pardon.
damn that.
Because
I guess
just goes to the
I
VP, swear the VP in immediately. VP pardons them. They put another person in, give them a political office for 20 days.
I've been hearing stuff like that. I just don't know that that's going to
It
happen. I
has
don't
a
think he's
question of who, like, he can't do that if he wants to run in 2024.
I don't think his ego will allow it though. That's the thing.
But he couldn't do it if he's going to run in 2024. So if he doesn't do it, I think that's the bellwether. That's the bellwether for does he run, does he not run. If he wasn't going to run in 2024, if he didn't have plans or aspirants to run in 2024, he would be vacating the presidency right now to get a pardon. He'd be pulling a Nixon.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know.
So because we have NDAA and we're already an hour in and NDAA is going to take a while, let's skip New Labor Caucus.
Okay,
Move
cool,
on to
cool,
something
cool.
else. So let's do NDAA. So what's the big? So for anybody that doesn't know, NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act. Basically, is the primary funding for most of our military intelligence operations that exist in the United States, and it has to be authorized every year.
It has to be authorized every year. It was passed shortly after 9/11. It gave the president a bunch of new expanded powers. One of them that's received a lot of vociferous criticism has been the indefinite detention clause, which allows for the indefinite detention of American citizens with ties to with potential ties to terrorist organizations. And there's a lot of stuff that like expanded the expanded executive action. What is the word that was like the PF debate topic a few years ago, where it's the president can authorize military action in another country?
Authorization use of military force.
There, expanded that for the president. Expanded a lot of surveillance powers for executive agencies and stuff like that. I think that like the Patriot Act gets a lot more attention in that front, but like the NDAA has stuff on it as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the NDAA also was the original AMF for the war on terror, which basically still exists to this day. From 2001 until to this day, the president has a carte blanche authorization to use the military force to stop terroristic activities.
Um, I am not 100% sure that it was the original one. I think the AUMF is a separate doctrine. Yeah, I think it's a separate doctrine, but I could be wrong on that. So anyway, the NDAA is up for has been up for reauthorization since the summer. And it has been a political football since then. If you Google National Defense Authorization Act plus Trump, you'll get a lot of really interesting results where, there's people talking about how they've basically been renegotiating it. There's a lot of political footballs, chief among them for the Trump administration right now, being the removal of the name of Confederate generals from military bases. Which he is now threatening to veto any NDAA reauthorization bill that comes through Congress and hits his desk that has that component on it. So he wants to leave the names of Confederate generals. This is pandering to the base, playing to the base, showing I'm standing up for heritage and history, yada yada yada. What's interesting is that Chuck Grassley and other, establishment Republicans are basically saying we'll pass it through with a majority, even if you veto it. We have the votes to get it through because the hawks in both the Democratic and Republican Party make up a sufficiently powerful voting bloc in Congress to where they can get it through. Progressives don't want to expend the political capital to deny something that they think is probably going to get passed anyway.
Yeah, the only one you'll talk about will be Bernie.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they won't show up for the vote. That'll be the way that most of them won't even bother to show up and vote against it. So, so there's that. I think Grassley is largely correct that it gets passed, but there's a lot of interesting stuff that's happening around this discussion. So I found out in doing a little bit of digging on the NDAA today that number one, there is a policy that is being added into this reauthorization that would increase federal oversight for shell companies. Actually, I'm going to pull up an article just so I'm sure that what I'm talking about is not complete bullshit.
Federal oversight of shell companies? Talk about something that gets left out of that bill right at the last second.
So U.S. lawmakers are trying to make it to end anonymous shell companies in a defense spending bill. So this is not saying that shell companies can't exist, but that anonymous shell companies can't exist. Now, the argument here that is being made is that I'll just quote Mark Warner because he has he's one of the Democratic senators from Virginia. He's advocated for these sorts of reforms. And he said, quote, "It is past time to put an end to the secrecy that allows drug cartels, human traffickers, arms dealers, terrorists, and kleptocrats to exploit the United States banking system in order to carry out anti-American activities. I know that that the current holes in our financial system pose a serious threat to national security. Further, let's see, where's this other quote that I saw? I can't find that quote right there. But basically, the idea is that this is against national interest in order to allow this to keep going on. So there is broad agreement between the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and the more hawkish national security side. The recent Republicans now deciding that they care about human trafficking. That has kind of played a role in this. And the idea is that basically these companies set up these shell companies that they can then launder money through from less than legal activities. And this has made the U.S. A site for a lot of really, really sketchy financial transactions. It's become a prominent destination for tainted money, largely because of how some of the world's best options for wanting to cloak their activity behind highly secretive shell companies. Tax Justice Network ranks the United States the second most secretive jurisdiction on earth, second only to the Cayman Islands. We beat everyone like Switzerland and what's that country, the micronation, the south of France?
Luxembourg?
Monterey?
No. Well, Luxembourg
has the Monte Carlo. It has the Monte Carlo casino in it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not Montenegro though.
No.
Anyway, the point is that they're putting an end to anonymous shell companies. And I think that a lot of people are going to be really upset about this, but it's just like an interesting thing where like, are we rooting for the military industrial complex, or are we rooting for large financial institutions that have their hands in a lot of like less than savory pockets? I mean, I just got done talking about how we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, but it's like, which of these is the better world? One where the NDAA gets reauthorized and we get we get like some minor regulation of anonymous shell companies, or a world in which Trump somehow magically vetoes the NDAA reauthorization and like, puts a major blow to the intelligence and military industrial complex.
I don't know who's winning the axis of evil award in this particular situation, but I do know who's more powerful, and that's the military industrial complex.
Because my point is that there's substantial overlap between that and the corrupt moneyed interests.
I don't think they care. I think they care more about getting their money. If it means some oversight, they'll just find other ways to do it. I mean, like, they don't have any issues working with dictators and warlords from other countries, right? So, like, it's not like this is the only way they're going to money launder, right? Like, they're going to find ways, right? The question is it so obvious and apparent or not, right? And the military industrial complex is all about not being obvious and apparent, right? So even if this was struck from the bill and they still passed it, a lot of those corporations are going to stop using that format because it's now become a political target, right? It's already just its introduction into the bill as a first step is going to make those companies more weary of using that because it means that they can't access it. So most of those companies are probably going to already move their stuff to the Cayman Islands, right? Get it out of the American situation altogether and just control it that way. Also, like, there's a presupposition that this ever gets into the bill without the approval of the military industrial complex. This may be a way that the big boys get rid of the little boys.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know. I thought this was one interesting aspect of it. There is more. Do we want to keep focusing on this, or can we move on to the other interesting aspects?
Yeah, we can move on to whatever else, right? But like, I just think that, like, I don't know who's more evil. I know who's more powerful, though.
Yeah, and that's fair. I tend to agree that I think that, well, I agree with you on who's more powerful. I'll take a stab and say the military industrial complex is more evil because that's a substantial portion of our economy anyway. And like, they do a lot of sketchy backroom stuff anyway. So the slightly less serious, let's get into the politics of this for a little bit, because part of the reason that people think that like the NDAA could legitimately be in trouble, Grassley is asserting that they have enough to overturn it. But part of the reason for concern to begin with is that we're into the lame duck session. Trump is like probably at his most powerful during this time because he can basically do whatever he wants and Congress isn't really going to be able to get much done. In addition, he fired Mark Esper, and that seems to have been an indicator to a lot of people who pay attention to this sort of thing that Trump might be sticking it to the intelligence and to the military, industrial, and intelligence communities.
He did what now?
What?
What did he do?
He fired Mark Esper.
Esper. Fired Mark Esper. I heard fire marked.
Oh no, he fired.
I was like, fire marked. What the hell does that mean?
Mark Esper.
Okay, so he fired Mark Esper, darling of the intelligence community.
That's been an indicator for people who pay attention to these things that Trump is like looking to stick it to perceived enemies in the.
But he's firing everyone. He's gutting the executive, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal. The goal has nothing to do with those people. It has to do with gutting the executive so that Biden is spending his first 100 days just trying to make the executive function.
Well, now that all the transition stuff has like been authorized, do you like doesn't that kind of stand counter to that?
Oh.
Because if the transition team can see that like that, oh, isn't like this is being cut, this is being staffed, like yeah, that just gets added to a list of things that they have to do. But like they're drawing up paperwork, they're drawing up day one paperwork for him to sign now.
So the other aspect of this is with how aggressively crazy the executive has been under Trump. Is he not doing Biden the biggest favor ever by firing so many people? Because now Biden doesn't have to sit there and go, can we justify getting rid of this person? Can we not justify getting rid of this person? What does continuity of government look like? How does that function? I think Biden, so many people that there's not continuity of government anyway, so he could just fire the rest of them and replace everybody.
I think Biden already has, like, even if Trump didn't fire them, I think Biden has a really good case.
But I think it takes him 2 years to fire everybody. Right? Yeah. Like, he does the Obama, right? He brings a third of his people in, and then after a year, he brings a new third in and gets rid of all the another third of people that weren't his. And then after year 2, he gets rid of the last third and puts his third in, right? Biden's not going to have that problem. He's going to put 2/3 of his people in from the get-go because there's all these vacant positions.
Yeah.
And I mean, the entirety of the entirety of the Department of State has to be rebuilt. All of it, right? Mm-hmm. From the ground up. We haven't had actual diplomats in 3 years.
He's literally just going to be having his list of people from the Obama administration that he's calling. That's what this first round of cabinet appointments is showing me anyway, that like he's literally just calling in people that he knows and trusts.
All the Obama.
And that honestly has been like causing its own, ruffling of feathers, because there are people who've been on the list for longer, who've had their names out there for longer, who are getting passed over for people who Biden is familiar with, who are kind of upset about it. But I think that that's to be expected. That's not anything that should surprise anybody. I mean, right. Independently of whether I like those people or think that they have good policies, it makes sense to call people that you've worked with before and that you have like working relationships with. That just makes sense. So that's enough.
Anything else serious when you talk about the NDA?
I don't have anything serious. No. Can we talk about aliens now?
Yes.
All right. So one of the things that Trump vetoing the NDAA would mean is that we don't get access to a whole bunch of information regarding UFOs. Now, why is this happening? So over the past couple of years, if you've been paying attention, you might have seen headlines about Navy pilots and Air Force pilots and whatnot reporting a whole bunch of UFOs. And what is happening is that in the NDAA, they are now pushing for the declassification of a bunch of this material. If Trump were to veto it, not only would we not get this legislation that bans anonymous shell companies, we would, and strike a blow to the military industrial complex, we would also not get to find out about aliens.
Wow.
Well, aliens. It's probably just like, military test hardware from China and Russia and stuff like that. Like realistically, it is probably just another country's military hardware. You don't think so?
Aliens, dude. God. What kind of world do you live in?
Okay.
Have you not heard about these pills? Okay? They look like Tic Tacs. And they move in ways in which don't make sense in our current understanding of physics. All right? They're clearly not advanced military technology. That's ridiculous. I'll tell you why. Because they are the spacecraft of the large gray aliens. And the large grays, thankfully, are largely unconcerned with our lives here. They're just using some of our resources when they need to. It's a pit stop, right, on the way to the galactic universe. They're not particularly interested in us. The little grays, those are the people who like to experiment on humans. If you've ever been abducted before, that was who did it. Conversely, these groups are very, very good for us because they both have a permanent enemy, which people like, Hillary Clinton and George W. Bush are members of, which are the reptilians. And the reptilians like to don human clothing.
Hold on, are these the 4 different types of aliens that we were going to talk about?
These are 3 of the types so far that I've discussed. The tall grays, who are largely unconcerned with us. The small grays, who are like into everything. They just want to know how everything works. So they're super into us. If you've ever been abducted, it's probably by them. But they're not going to hurt you. Don't worry about it. There's nothing wrong with you. They probably helped you. They're very interested in our anatomy. And then you have the reptilians, who are actually evil. They want to enslave all of humanity. And they're doing a very, very good job of doing so far. Most of our world leaders, Boris Johnson, for instance, reptilian. Sure.
So what is the 4th kind?
The 4th kind are unknown. But we know that there are a set all blue aliens. And they are feared by all the other forms of alien life. So, seen them very, very few times. Most of our understanding of the blues comes from Ashtar and his musings towards our proctors on Earth. And it is very important that we take this into consideration when we're discussing these sorts of institutional issues. So now that I'm done with explaining the conspiracy of all alien races on Earth, I do have a bit for you, which is that I actually think like the evidence of these UFOs not being human are actually pretty good. So the particulars of these alien groups, whatever, right? But the truth of the matter is that like.
Oh look! I'm completely receptive to the idea that
they're
the U.S.
crazy aviation tech.
No idea what this is.
So
I'm not. I'm a big believer in the law of parsimony. I think that like there is not enough positive evidence in favor of it being spacecrafts from another world to warrant my belief that that is what it is.
If they're not spacecrafts from another world and they're not American spacecraft, we need to be worried. Because if any entity on Earth has access to this technology, if they ever decide to go to war with us, we're done.
I don't know if it's necessarily a technology though. Like, is it like is there? Could it maybe be?
I'll give you the accounting I've heard.
Do what?
I'll give you the accounting. It comes from another very famous podcast that maybe has a commentator of the UFC on it. That happens to be the main contributor to it. But he had an entire episode with literally one of the Air Force pilots that grabbed that tried to catch one of these. Okay. So, apparently they keep finding them in the Pacific hovering over water. Okay. Sitting over the water doing something. Not certain. Nobody's certain what exactly they're doing. They're hovering just above the water. No trails. No visible explanation of how they're maintaining their levitation. Okay. There's not like, a helicopter would be parsing the water out under it, right? None of that sort of matter movement is being detected. They are being picked up on short-range radar. And so they will catch them predominantly from ships with highly advanced radar technology. It's very good at catching things like stealth bombers and things of that sort. They're what we use to catch stealth technology.
So here's my question. I hear you. Why is it unreasonable for me to hear that and think like, okay, China has developed a material that they have made a balloon out of, and they're putting these out here to basically fuck with American.
Okay, I can explain why that doesn't make any sense in just a second. So they try to place scoping mechanism. They fly F-22s out there to go chase these things. right?
Uh,
They try to put their scopes on these, as you would call them, weather balloons. Okay, they're Tic Tacs.
I'm not
Okay,
calling them weather balloons.
all right.
I'm saying like so.
No. I'll explain. I'll explain why it doesn't make any sense. Okay, but what it is, they try to. So there, that possibility to this point makes sense, right? They try to actively lock. So if you've never seen this in like, if you've never seen Top Gun, like imagine the scene from, if you've seen Top Gun, imagine the scene where like the missile locks onto the still and then it shoots, right? That kind
Yeah.
of direct targeting mechanism. They can point it at things and target them and look at them. Are actively jammed by these craft. Not passive jamming, not they're not seen by the coding, but like it actively jams those systems. Okay. When they try to get closer, they tried to buzz past one of these to get a better look of it, right? As they got close enough, it moved so quickly from one spot to another that it defies propulsion understanding. The understandings of the way that propulsion works, because it went from sitting just above water edge to thousands of feet in the air in a matter of 2 seconds. Substantially faster than anything that we know of. Our rockets don't move that fast, right? Also, when they start to try to intercept these devices, they will disappear functionally, right? They'll be gone. They'll move so quickly they're gone, and then will later be picked up by that same aircraft radar miles away.
So that's really weird. And that definitely puts a hole in their balloons that China is using to fuck with us hypothesis. That said, while I am receptive to the idea that they're like, I'm more than receptive. I like actively believe that like we are not
aliens.
But like there's no way that the universe is as large as we believe it to be, and we're just like completely on our own. That life didn't, like what we could reasonably classify as life, didn't emerge elsewhere. I think with like just finding water on the moon and Mars and shit like that makes it like pretty reasonable to expect that like water emerged on other planets. And I also am like receptive to the idea that like there's non-carbon based life, and we've been able to they've been able to do like simulations where they project what like silicon based life would look like and stuff like that, which is pretty wacky research that is really interesting coming out of astrobiology programs. But where this loses me is I'm willing to believe everything you've just said is happening. I don't think that it being weird is positive evidence of it being extraterrestrial technology.
Okay. However,
I'm just comfortable enough saying
defying all understandings of modern thermodynamics indicates it's a type of technology that either A, is completely asymmetrical and an entity on Earth has it, or B, makes sense that it was developed outside of the confines of what we understand as thermodynamics.
So I think that like if the argument that we're making is that like it is either something that a country has developed that's completely asymmetrical that nobody else has knowledge of, or B, it's aliens. I think that falls into the same trap of saying like either humans, like ancient people, did the impossible thing of like moving these massive stone rocks to hinge or whatever, or it's aliens. And I'm not willing to take that. I think it's I'm more comfortable saying I don't know, and I'd like to find out more. I'd like to see these documents declassified. I'd like to be able to read them and get more of these reports out. Like that would be cool.
The one bit for you that I'll give you that you'll like, because you don't believe in aliens.
No. I believe in aliens.
You can't back out of this. You don't believe in aliens.
I'm not convinced that they are visiting us.
All right, you don't believe in aliens. It's okay. We understand that.
I don't believe they are visiting us.
You don't love aliens. I got it. When they come for us, I'm going to remind them that you denied their existence. But the aspect of this is interesting, though. So one other example of this that we know in the past is the 71 Blackbird. Okay, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is the United States would detect faint radar and would purposely send our own F-16 jets to attempt to intercept our own 71 Blackbird.
Mhm.
We did this on purpose to test our capability of tracking them. So there is a reasonable world in which this is actually US technology, hyper advanced US technology, which, given the amount of money we put into our military industrial complex, they aren't coming up with something hyper complex and completely out of the ordinary, then they're not doing their job, right? That we're attempting to see if our own pilots could determine what the hell they are. We have some of the best pilots in the world that are being sent on these missions to try to figure out what these things are. If you were trying to figure out what a response from a foreign nation would be to a new technology that you've developed,
Test it out on your own people.
test it out on your own pilots.
That's one example. I have another thought on what this could be. Have you seen the documentary Hypernormalization?
Nope.
It is fantastic. You would probably enjoy it, as would most people in our audience. There's a part in there where they talk to a bunch of CIA agents from the 50s and 60s, where they basically got people from like around Area 51 to believe that the things they were seeing were aliens, and it was basically just a big disinformation campaign to mask the development of new technologies and stuff like that. It's called the strategy is called perception management. Okay, so here's my question: in a world where information is so highly, there's so much exchange of information, things are so complex now. What if this is just some big perception management project to, which I guess is like kind of your point. But I could see this being, a perception management task as well, where they've just got this thing where they're like, hey, let's go fuck with some pilots, to like some Navy pilots, to like get some wacky reports out there, and that distracts from some other thing that we're trying to do.
But it doesn't detract from what their actual reports were. And I mean, these are reports that they were under oath to.
I'm not saying the pilots are lying. I think the pilots are bamboozled. I'm saying, like, what if this is like just some intelligence, some op where they're, messing with these pilots to get a story out that then distracts from something else that's happening.
Well, it's very clear they haven't been trying to prevent the story from getting out. That's a new.
Right. That's my point.
That's a new thing,
they
right?
want the story to come out and proliferate. They want people to believe it.
Yeah, if I was a betting man, but if I were a betting man, my bet would be that this is U.S. technology that we're testing on our own pilot. Because anytime you have something sufficiently asymmetric, so if the reports of what these craft can do is true, then it would mean we could load a nuke in one and in a matter of seconds get it to any city on Earth and launch it.
Well, that's horrifying, and I hope that's
in a matter of seconds be able to do that. And then before you even see it launch the bomb, the craft is gone. But not just nukes, any kind of weapon system you would necessarily want to use, right? If there is
biological weapon systems.
Well, no, but I mean even conventional weapon systems, right? Imagine a world in which, let's just use the example because he's already dead. So Osama bin Laden, we know he's in this building at this exact moment in time. You don't have to wait the 17 minutes it takes the F-22s to get there anymore. There's no, you hear planes in the distance, they run into the bunker. It appears and launches.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I just
asymmetric weapon.
The same thing that makes me think that it's asymmetric that makes me think that it's not aliens is the same thing that's kind of keeping me from believing that it's an asymmetric technical development. That would track with history and stuff like that for sure. But the way you're describing the tech, it just seems like so outlandish that like I have a hard time grasping that.
So
And I get that like I get that this is just my own ignorance, but for me, for my tiny brain, it makes more sense that this is some sort of like perceptual brouhaha that people who know how these systems work are messing with them, and they're doing this either as some sort of perceptual management op.
So the two things that make me think that it might be asymmetric technology. One, about 3 or 4 years ago, NASA scientists released a study that indicated that they had came up with a possibility of a technology that could create, this sounds crazy, okay? To create propulsion without any kind of output, which violates the laws of physics, right? So it was creating propulsion through vibratory mechanisms, right? But there was no exit point for them. So they constantly, it was like harmonic, right? They constantly recreated themselves over and over and over again and created propulsion out of it.
This is the EM drive.
Yeah. Right? Theoretically, if NASA is figuring out now, we know in the 1960s, for instance, when we were doing the space race, right, that NASA would run into a problem, and then about a third of the time the military had already found the solution, like previously, just from other shit they'd done.
Yeah,
right?
Most innovation is done via the military.
Yeah. So the question then becomes, if NASA 5 years ago was finding the EM drive, right, and was violating laws of physics with their understandings of that, what would have happened if the military-industrial complex has gotten a hold of that understanding 15 or 20 years ago? What if in 2000 they had developed the EM drive and they have 20 years of evolution on it?
Okay, hold on. So here's why. So this is the EM drive has been debunked as a method of propulsion. In May 2018, researchers from the Institute of Aerospace Engineering at Technische Universität in Dresden, Germany, concluded that the dominant effect underlying the apparent thrust could be clearly identified as an artifact caused by Earth's magnetic field interacting with power cables in the chamber, a result that other experts agree with.
Mm-hmm. What if we have the ability to use those same systems to move a craft on Earth? Maybe it's not an interstellar craft. Maybe it's only uses the magnetic systems of the Earth to do it.
It's saying that it was in conjunction with metal cables in the field, and that the drive.
But like if they figured out how to manipulate those magnetic fields.
I mean, that's possible. I'm just saying what I'm reading here.
I understand. What I'm saying though is that's known. Right? Go back to the stealth bomber program.
Right. No, look,
we didn't know that shit existed for 25 years.
Look, I'll be the first to acknowledge that a lot of stuff that got developed during the Cold War seemed like science fiction at the time. I'm willing to believe that there's going to be a lot of sci-fi type shit that gets developed in my lifetime. All I'm saying is that like I'm gonna withhold, positive belief in anything relating to this and just say like it's interesting. I want to keep an eye on it, but I'm not gonna like say that it's aliens or something like that.
Only two possibilities: asymmetric weapon technology or aliens. That's my final word.
I don't know. I think that there's the possibility that it's just a massive perception management project as well. But like to your point, could be asymmetric technology.
I just think that there's sufficient technology we don't know about right now that the U.S. military has already developed. That it wouldn't surprise me if a new form of aviational technology was developed.
And
also, what if they did actually have aliens in Roswell, and the perception management was a double fake?
Oh, we're gonna make it to where like that would actually play into the Baudrillardian thesis really well. That everything is fact and counterfact. because like they where we put out the information that the aliens exist so that people will disbelieve it, and then the people who believe it look like kooks. But
So the other theory, and this is one of the better theories that I've seen, is that like there's a theory that saucers in particular have existed for a very long time, and we've been experimenting with them, but we haven't been able to figure out the systems very well. Right? Maybe that they're terrestrial technologies, but that these sorts of classical saucers that people have described, right? Years and years and years and years.
Cigar shapes and
This is just like the culmination of that technology over 50, 60 years of development, and that we now have created an actual craft that not only can use that technology, but does so reliably without crashing. Which would make sense why you would test it over the water.
That is cool. And if we end up getting saucer technology, I want to ride in a flying saucer.
What if they look like Tic Tacs instead of flying saucers?
I don't really give a shit. I think it'd be cool.
So the other theory, but the primary theory about this is that they couldn't possibly be human spacecraft. They're drones.
Well,
because human bodies couldn't accept that amount of acceleration. That's some new kind of understanding of how matter moves.
I think that's probably like I think you could, like, most systems that are being developed now are probably
drone systems.
Because I mean, like, look at the cost that it takes to train a pilot, like, to fly in these things. Because like when you train a soldier, you're not just investing in the hardware, you're investing in a person who's then tasked with keeping that hardware safe. With a drone pilot, you can lose the drone, but not lose the pilot. It's substantially a safer protection of the investment that the military is making. And I hate talking about people like that, but like that's the reality of how this is being thought about. Is the military is investing in a person as an asset. And so if they can have a asset that they're not going to need to replace paired with an asset that is more readily replaceable, good for them.
It also is just like find someone who's not very introspective, make them play a bunch of video games, and then put them into a thing that looks like it's a video game, and they can.
It's fucking Ender's Game. Yeah, everybody thinks it's a video game, but it's not.
Huh?
Ender's Game. The whole plot of Ender's Game is that these kids are playing.
This is literally the culmination of a future Ender's Game, right? Like, discover and decide. Like, there's also a really good Stargate episode about this, where these two societies have been warring for so long, they decided that physically fighting isn't the thing anymore. They play a game, and then depending upon the casualties, they gas that number of people on either side.
Holy fuck, that's horrible.
I mean, and it's like a lottery too, like whether you get gassed or not.
I think there's a Voyager, a Star Trek Voyager episode like that, where these species develop robots that fight each other, but then the robots like annihilate their creators, and then like they just fight each other perpetually. Right. But there's precedent for this. In the 90s, in the Gulf War, the U.S. military called the pilots of the I don't think they were drones at the time, but like they were the people that were piloting the missiles, the remote control missiles that they could like fly through windows and shit. Those people were called like Nintendo soldiers.
Makes sense.
Which is,
it also explains why. So like it's also non-coincidental that the explosion in personal computer technology and console technology existed to coincide with the development of drone programs.
Yeah.
And it's not a coincidence, right? Like, train children from a very young age to play video games, and then when you need warriors that like to play, you just make it seem like a video game, and they don't feel the reality of it because they've been murdering people in Grand Theft Auto and shooting people in Call of Duty their whole life, anyways.
Yeah, we need to get cyberneticians on here to talk about that hypothesis.
We should. There's some that
I ordered the Grove book.
Did you?
Yeah,
it's a very good book. You should read it.
Which
one?
I ordered hold on, I forgot the name because I ordered like 4 other books. Um,
Savage Ecology.
yeah, Savage Ecology.
Very, very, very good.
I also ordered the Surya biography of Bataille.
Of course you did.
Huh?
Of course you did.
Yeah. Um, but I also ordered Croker's Exit to the Post-Human Future, and I'm finally ordering Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media, because despite my rhetoric degree, I have never read Understanding Media. I know what the
you were
book
too busy
says.
reading. You were too busy reading David Zaretsky, Interpersonal Communication Theory.
No, I know what the book says. I'm not reading it for some sort of like revelation or anything like that. I want to have. It's an influential book. I want to have it. I want to say I've read it. So, I'm you know, like you can read a synopsis of it or watch a documentary about it. You can get and McLuhan's ideas have been refined and like expanded on, and so it's more reading for like historical interest as like a foundational text and like a lot of different like theorizations that we're interested in. So.
Sounds good to me. Any last shout outs or call outs before we leave?
No, but like if y'all want to read Savage Ecologies with me, you should order the book and read it, and maybe we can have a discussion episode where we talk about it.
Sure, we can do an off schedule episode and talk about Savage Ecology. That'd be fun.
We
Who
can
knows? Maybe we could see if the author wants to.
Yeah, that would be cool. Because Nicholas has a personal connection with this author.
Professional.
Professional connection. Excuse me.
And it's also not a real one. Like he was my camp counselor at one point. So there's. Yeah, I'm old enough that Jairus Groves was my camp counselor. That's all you need to know.
That's whack. Yeah. Okay.
Huh?
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. It's supposed to be arriving like Tuesday, so.
All right, awesome. We could set up a time and do a book club episode. Eric is the official advocate of the Partisan Podcast Book Club. If you have any suggestions, you should totally give Eric those suggestions.
So the first book we'll be looking at is Savage Ecologies, because it overlaps with a lot of the things that we've been talking about in this particular what is this, episode 3 now?
Yep.
In this 3-episode run, we've basically like kind of had 3 overlapping themes: corporate control, the intelligence community, political theater, and then like how all of that like amalgamates into a war between the global north and the global south.
So Savage Ecology.
Yeah, basically. I haven't read the book yet. But from my understanding, that it thematically fits with everything we've been talking about.
We probably won't agree with everything that Professor Groves, Dr. Groves, agrees to, but it is a very, very good book.
I don't expect to read anything that I read in the book. So
fair.
I don't even.
My only comment is we will be back next Wednesday. Chilling out, talking about things, talking about politics, probably trying to not get assassinated by the CIA, things like that, right? Like, they're telling all their secrets, but we're not.
We're probably relatively inoffensive to them. They don't care
so far. But I just told about all of their military secrets about how they're interacting with gray aliens. Okay, like clearly I'm a threat now. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, did you know that the person that ratted on Fred Hampton was the original founder of the of Amnesty International?
That sounds right.
It does, but I learned that the other day, and that's kind of wacky. Shout out to another podcast, by the way. If you're interested in history and stuff like that and revolutionary politics, you should check out Working Class History. They are a podcast that just released a book that is a collection of like this day in history type things. They have a fantastic Twitter and Instagram following that is like really good for learning about the global struggle against powerful people that want to immiserate the rest of the world. And I think that they do good work.
All right. So thank you for coming to episode 3, the Partisan Podcast, with the amazing title that I've placed on it. It'll be up on, if you didn't get to see it on Twitch with us, it'll be up on YouTube probably tomorrow. I'm going to set it going today, and then it should be up tomorrow. And everybody have a super awesome aggressively settler Thanksgiving. And we will have, I will eat lots and lots of food and then not pretend like it is a non-settler holiday.
Eat the food. Don't apologize for genocide. Read more. Learn more.
Don't apologize for genocide?
Oh no, do like
I heard don't apologize for genocide.
Don't engage in apologia for genocide.
Oh,
is how I intended that to come out.
He goes, don't apologize for genocide.
No. That's I meant it to be like don't engage in apologia.
So I'm gonna clip just the part where you say don't apologize for genocide and then post it.
I realize now that word. I'm realizing now that word has 2 meanings, and that probably was not the best way to structure that. But I intended it to mean apologia, not.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. Eric had to get us one dumb thing in an episode, so he finally got it in.
Several.
Right at the end, he was like,
I'm gonna melt now.
Don't apologize for genocide.
Can we clip that from the YouTube?